Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed. What's going on, you guys? It's your man, Immanuel. This is a new episode of Why We Succeed. Today, I'm joined by two very special guests, none other than my man, Marlon Walls and Alex Kamunyo from the Money Monopolizers podcast. What's going on, Alex and Marlon?
What's good, my brother? How you doing?
Yo, man, I'm excited to have you guys on here, man. You brothers are doing some amazing things out here in the YouTube streets, man. I stumbled across your podcast and I was like, yo, these brothers are on their business. They on their grind, man. So what got you guys into the whole Money Monopolizer space, man? What made you guys say, hey, let's start this podcast. Let's dive into it, share our knowledge with the people.
Yeah, man. So it's interesting. So did you find the podcast off of YouTube?
I did, man. I did.
I love hearing that.
That's dope, man. That's dope. So man, it's the journey it started, really a few years ago, but really it was I would say, I don't even want to say culmination, but it was like it was the sum of a whole bunch of conversations that we was already having offline and, without having something recording us, just because I don't know when you kind of want to get into it, but maybe we can get into it now, just in the sense of like our journey and how, we kind of got to where we are now and what we're doing now. Because that's really, the podcast came as a byproduct of that. Like the podcast was nothing. We never intentionally started a podcast with the fact of like, oh, this is like, let's just, do this podcast and not necessarily like do anything else. And so, we grew up together in Houston and, since we was like 12 years old. And we ended up, going to different colleges. And, for me personally, when I was in school, I kind of had an internship my senior year of college or my last year of college. Okay. And, I studied civil engineering. And, my last year, I had this internship where, I was 21. No, how old was I? Well, I was 20 when I started it. And then, I turned 21 that year in 2017. And it was kind of interesting because I was by far the youngest person in the entire office. Mm-hmm. But one thing that, I always noticed was like, we would work late a lot. And, there was always older people that were there, working with me. Right. And, it's 7, 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And, I'm a college student and I'm working 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's cool. Not a big deal. Right. Mm-hmm. But for a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old, 65-year-old guy that was there too, to be working at that same time, it was kind of just like, that's kind of strange. Right. And this is like my first time having like a office 9 to 5 type of job. Right. Okay. And so it's that whole thing is kind of new to me. So at that point, it's kind of like, I just saw it as, this is not what I really want to do for the rest of my life. Because it just didn't feel right. I mean, it's fine for me as a 21-year-old to not really have to be here at this time at night in the office. But for someone that's 65 years old to be here too, it just didn't sit right with me. Because it's like, I had nothing to go home to. You actually have a family. You have kids. You're missing dinner right now. Right. You're missing your kids' games. You're missing all this stuff. So to me, it's just like, nah, that's not it. So I literally started researching at that time. It's like, how do people get wealthy and, how do you retire early? And this was in my last year of college. I found out about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the whole concept of buying assets to cover your lifestyle. And I read that book that year. And then I told myself, I'm going to graduate. And then as soon as January 2018 hit, I got my plan to get out this job. Or, I'm putting a plan in place to get out. My goal was, by the time I'm 28, I was 21 at that time. So 28, which would have been 2024, I'll be out my job. So it was 7 years that I was going to give myself. And I said, I'm going to use real estate. So real estate will be the vehicle to get out of the job, right? Wow. I can buy enough properties to essentially cover my lifestyle expenses and be able to just live, when I have to trade my time for money, right? So that's when Marlon as well, I told him about the book and I was like, you got to check this out. This whole concept of like early retirement, financial freedom. This is crazy. This is actually, people are actually out here doing this. Right. And so, he read it. And then from that point on, it was just like the rest was really history because, we just kind of went full force into it. Ended up buying our first properties that year. Wow. Bought many more properties after that. And, we kind of started the podcast in 2019 because again, we was talking so much every single night. We was getting off work and then we'll go home and talk for hours about these.
Right, y'all was in the lab, man.
Yeah, man. And it was like before the cameras or nothing, like before people knew about what we was already having these conversations. For at least like 18 months.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, that's some time right there.
Yeah, man. So from that point, we started a podcast, and just because it's like, yo, we need to get this information out there. People need to know about this too, because this is crazy. Like the fact that, I can retire, but why aren't people doing this? Like, it don't make sense. People, like, it didn't feel normal for me or for us to like go to a 9 to 5 because we had only worked it for so long, so we hadn't been tainted by the mentality or that mindset of like, this is what you do. It just didn't feel right. So you just ask why, and so that's what we really did. We started a podcast. Podcast has been super successful ever since then, and we've scaled our businesses. I was able to scale my. I have a cleaning business and a real estate business, and we did over $400,000 last year in revenue, and now I was able to leave my job at the age of 25, 3 years before the original target of 28 years old. So
that's amazing, and I'm coming over to you right now, Marlon. But before I do that, this is the one thing. Like, some people may be like, "Yo, why'd you start off with the podcast or the question about the podcast and how you guys got into it?" The reason why is because a lot of people start podcasts, a lot of people start YouTube channels, right? But oftentimes we don't know the journey behind it. Like, most people don't just wake up and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna start a podcast." Right. And what you just shared, Alex, lets you know that, hey, like, this is years in the making. Like, we didn't just come to the table one day and say, "Hey, I want to start a podcast." Yo, I do too. Let's start it. And then now we got this hit podcast that we can share so many gems. It goes through that journey first. So this is the one thing that we all know, right? There's two sides to a story. So we've heard Alex's process. What's the flip side? What did it look like from your end, Marlon?
Well, I don't know how detailed you want to go into it, but I guess just giving that backstory though. We like Alex did mention, we both did grow up in like junior high to high school together, and we were always like both motivated by like just being great at whatever we did, like trying to be the best at whatever we were doing, whether it was in the classroom, whether it was just playing 2K, whether it was playing sports. Like, we were always trying to be the best at whatever we did. And so we built a bond around that, as just both trying to succeed at whatever we did. And that carried over through high school. And then we, like he said, we both went to college in separate colleges, but we still stayed connected. And then as we were graduating, that's when we both went into the workforce. And for me, my story, I guess on my personal side, is that while I was in college, I was a 4.0 student. So 4.0 student in engineering physics, not for one semester, but for every semester while I was there.
Wow.
Also on the football team. So everybody looked at me.
Yo, you like the anomaly, man. Like, most people like, how you do that?
So that's what that's what I'm telling the story for, because everybody looked at me as that type of person. When I was in college, everybody's like, "Yo, I don't care if you need a psychology question, if you have a history question, if you got a what's it called, Western civilization question." Right. Marlon got the answer.
And you were the Renaissance man.
I'm like, I don't know everything, but I mean, yeah, sure, that's fine. Y'all come to me. I'll see what I can do to help. So, but people started putting me on billboards, like around the campus, alumni magazines, and all that stuff. And so, what that's leading people to believe, also for myself, is that I know a lot of stuff about life or whatever. It took me graduating from college. I graduated in December 2017. January 2018, me and Alex both started into the workforce, our separate corporations or whatever. 2 weeks in, you get this thing called a paycheck.
Right.
First time I ever got a paycheck, because I played football from junior high all the way through college. So I never really had time to go get a full-time job. And so this is my first full-time experience with getting a normal paycheck. Right. I get the direct deposit into my bank account that morning, and I'm like, yes, sir. This is gonna be nice. A nice engineering check. It's about time I start getting paid for all the work that we put in. So, okay, cool. Now, I've always been very mindful about my money, though. So even growing up, I was always an avid saver. And so I get to work. I get to my job that same day, and I'm like, okay, I want to see what my pay stub looks like. I'm very inquisitive about like what does my money look like when it comes in. So I go in and I see my pay stub. I'm like, okay, this is my first time seeing. Let me dissect this a little bit. The top line I see is the line item called gross pay, and I'm like, that's not what I made in my account. That says way more. Then I look around, I'm like, what? So where's the money I made in my account? Oh, shoot. Okay, it's down here at the bottom. Okay, so what happened? So okay, I got top line item is gross. This one says net. Okay, so in between there's these other line. I don't know what I'm looking at. So I'm like, okay, I found it on a paper somewhere. So on the side, there's one that says Fed, the minus X amount. There's state minus another amount. There's med, like I don't know what med is, minus another amount. Then it's like some random term, OASDI minus another amount. I'm like, that's it right there. If I subtract those numbers from that big number, that gets that number. I know where it's at. I don't know what this is though. So I called my dad. And immediately after, I'm like, Dad, man, listen, I don't know what this is on this paycheck, but somebody like stole my, like I see who it is. I don't know who these people are, but I see who it is, and I'm trying to like, what is this? He's like, man, what you talking about? Just taxes? And that's when I hung up the phone. I sit it down and I'm like, you telling me this is that same guy that just went through those 7 semesters of college, and everybody's looking at him trying to get all the answers for everything, 4.0 student, what have you, all those things that people thought I was. What I learned is that I didn't know a lot of things about life. And what I've understood now is that 4.0 student does not mean well-rounded that knows everything. 4.0 means that you are very good at one thing that you're doing. So engineering physics, I was good at that. That doesn't mean I know anything about taxes. Doesn't mean I know anything about real estate. It doesn't mean I know anything about stocks, about business. I don't know any of those things. But 4.0 student gives that misconception that you know a lot of things. And that was not the case for me. So that is what inspired me to say, okay, I don't know anything now. I like the very first, this is 2 weeks into life. I went through college I went through school for the past 21 years or whatever it is, 16 years. And I get 2 weeks into life and now I look like I don't know anything. Obviously, I don't know a lot. So now I need to figure out, what do I not know?
Right.
So this is when Alex brings forth Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Because I told him the same story. And he's like, hey, man, Rich Dad, Poor Dad has a lot of the things that we don't know about, like in life. And like, just check out this book. Right. I hadn't read a book since 8th grade. I bought that book February 18th of 2018. I finished that book in 2 days. And that's when the whole mentality shifted from there. And that's when we started really diving into education about real estate. And that's when we led to the story about us getting our first properties back in 2018. And we started just having those conversations, because now we're researching stuff. And this is one thing I really say is good about having somebody that's of a like mind as you, because now you can research, you can look up different things, you can read about different stuff. And now you have somebody to bounce ideas off of. That's where the conversation started between me and him. We did that for about a year and a half. And then they were like, man, we're the only two people that we can have these conversations with. Like, we can't really talk to anybody else about it. We don't know anybody else in our circle or even outside of here that has these same conversations. So that's when the idea came about to have the podcast. And so now we can start educating people on things that we're saying on a daily basis, say the same conversation, but put a camera in your face. And now we can impact more people, and other people can learn about the things that we weren't privy to learning growing up.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Yo, I love hearing both sides of the story and how both of you came to that central point. And this is the one thing that stood out to me that I want to get your take on, coming back over to you, Alex, is mindset, right? A lot of people have heard of the book and even read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What separates the two of you is that not only did y'all read it, not only did you share it with Marlon, but y'all actually took action. Y'all actually put together a plan. Y'all began to speak and put into action the things that were in the book. And I just want to get your perspective. What was it like to develop that mindset? What was fueling that? What was your inspiration?
I love that question, because, that's a running joke that we have too, just in the sense of like a lot of people, like when we found out the book, and I told Marlon about the book, and Marlon started telling people about the book. One thing that's like, I heard a lot and he heard a lot was like, oh yeah, I heard of that book. Oh, I read that book.
That's a good one.
He's like, yeah, that's a good book. Like, oh, and that's it. And then I was like, oh, but your life is still the same. Like, it wasn't that impactful. So it's like, people hear about it, but they don't take action. And that's when, at that point you kind of realize like, hey, you're actually built different than people in the sense of like, I can see something and I can apply it. But into the sense of like, for me in my specific situation, I think that the biggest thing for me was really because there's something to be said for finding this information at a younger age.
Right.
Because what happens is when you've been living your life for 20 years a certain way, you have to almost in a sense reverse a lot of damage. And when you've been working a 9-to-5 job for 10, 2, 3, 4 decades, it's a lot tougher to get into this new mentality of not trading your time for money and understanding that like you don't have to work until you are 65 years old. But for us, like I said, it was literally weeks into working a job that it's like, this just doesn't feel right.
Wow.
So it's just like you're questioning it. You're asking why. Most people don't ask why. They just take what's people say, this is what you're supposed to do. They don't ever ask why. So to me, it's like, I'm working and it's like, wait, why am I going to do this? Because and I'm breaking it down, really asking why, like a little kid always asks why, right? Just intuitively, they just always want to know, like, why am I doing this? And it's breaking it down. It's like, okay, I'm doing this because, okay, I need to live, right? I need money to be able to live, right? Okay, I need money to be able to live so that I can, one day also be able to not have to, work a job. So it's like, when I ask why, it's like, what are the other ways to get money without having to do it like this?
Right.
Like, isn't there another way to get to my ultimate destination, which is, retirement in a sense? That's the ultimate pinnacle that everyone's trying to get to be able to live without having to work. Right. But in reality, most people, you can only do that from 65 to on average, our average lifespan is 76 years old. You only got 11 years of living without working. How can I get to that now? And so once that book was introduced, that was the formula to get to it now. So it's like, it was no question in my mind that I had to implement this. It wasn't even like a thought where it's like, okay, I'm going to start this next. It's like, no, now, if I wasn't if I hadn't had one semester left at college, I probably would have said, I'm not even finishing college.
Yeah, you're a real one.
Yeah, I was, I already had one semester left. I'm going to get an engineering degree. I'm making a good salary. I can leverage that to get into the investments and stuff. So cool. I'm just keeping it real. So that was really it for us. It was like, yo, at a young age, it's a lot easier. You haven't been poisoned yet by the world. So,
oh man, that's good. And it's so interesting because my journey is similar with the exception of me stumbling across that book at that same period in time. Like I wish that when I went, because I had a similar experience, unlike you guys, I didn't go into engineering. I went into business and finance and accounting more specifically. So I get out of school, I start working full time and, it was great. To me, the glitz and the glamour was, traveling. Like one of my first clients, they sent me to New York. I'm from the Midwest, man. I ain't never been to the big city. So it was just like, oh man, this is great. They paying for everything. I'm like, yo, this is nice. I like this corporate thing.
Right.
But I promise you, man, I'll say this, you got me beat on the weeks. It took me a few months to adjust. And I was like, man, I've been living in hotels for like months. And, I like the travel, the benefits and all of that comes along with it. But the work, is this it? And I'm like, similar to you, I'm looking around like, yo, these people, they managers, they senior managers. I'm sure they bag is nice, but they sitting in the cubicle next to me. Like,
how old were you at that time? How old were you?
Oh man, at that time, I had to been around like 21, 22.
You hadn't been tainted.
Right. That's facts, man. And this is the interesting thing about me is like, I didn't come into this understanding of like business stuff until maybe like, I would say like 3-4 years ago, max. Yeah. Like I had heard whispers about it, like I had heard people mention a few different things, but it wasn't anything like, yo, here's this book that will show you the way. And I'll be honest, full transparency, I'm the type of person that based on similar to you, Marlon, where if I have something in mind, if somebody give me the blueprint on how to do it, like, yo, that's the cheat code. Like you said, like, yo, you give me the cheat code, I'm about to go execute it and knock it out of the park. Like, that's what I'm about to do. So for me, it was a little bit different because I got to that pivot point and I went more onto like a spiritual path as opposed to a financial path. And now, like years later, I'm having this shift and I'm like, oh man, like you telling me that I could have been chasing the bag in a different type of way without having to do the whole 9 to 5 thing. And now I feel like I'm playing catch up to a certain extent, but every lesson in life is a lesson learned for a reason. So I'm definitely not envious, but I can definitely relate to that path of like being there and being like, nah, this ain't I ain't about to be that dude 50, 60, and I'm still coming to this same office. Like, can't even see my family, like you said, working till like 8 o'clock. Nah, I'm good.
Man, I want to comment on just this part right here because you said you talk about being envious because you felt you're playing catch up. Understand that everybody's getting information at like a different time, and so the people that are already at a certain level, they're at that level because they started just a little bit before in the using the right information or implementing the right information. The people that we're seeing right now that we may feel envious about, that we see doing that stuff at a higher level, just look at when they started. They started at an earlier time, and thing is, they may have started with less information than what we have now. That speeds up the time gap between where we are today versus where we can get to, or versus where they are. It's the right information, and so just with the access to information, if you can digest it and start implementing, that curve is just expedited. That's why we're seeing 18-year-olds or even younger than that now that are able to achieve $1 million net worth, or that's able to like be able to retire their parents, for instance, because now the access to information changes that gap between, like I said, where you are today versus where you're trying to get to. And so now it's just about implementation at that point. So the biggest thing for you that you're doing is just starting. And once you start, now you just continue to seek the right information. And now you can essentially not really catch up, but you can achieve the same thing that you want to achieve that you saw everybody else doing before.
That's real, man. And you're spot on. And the one thing that I would say is I needed to go that path. And the reason why is because something that I found is just as important as securing the bag, right, is character development. And I needed to go through the process that I went to develop my character as a person, a human being, and as a man, because I was immature at that time, 21, 22, like my mind was in a whole different place than it is now. And I needed to get that character building piece in place. I needed to build that foundation so that when I do get the money, when I do get the opportunities, I'm not squandering them, right? And I think that that's really important as well, because sometimes opportunities come to people too soon and they don't know how to properly manage them or make the most out of them.
Yep, we see that all the time, especially with people, obviously with athletes, celebrities, and lottery winners, all those things. Like, you get the cart before the horse, and it's not gonna be pretty.
Right. Right. So I got a question for you guys. I know, Alex, you mentioned that you had the desire to retire. Marlon, was retiring early at 25 on your mind as well?
25 was too early. And like that was way too ambitious. So Alex has said 28. My goal I said was 32. And that was going to be through cash flowing $10,000 per month from real estate property. And that was the original goal that we had set out, that I set out for myself. And during that time when we had first started reading about Rich Dad Poor Dad and then all of the real estate books.
That's what's up. So Alex, how did you get into the real estate game, right? Because a lot of people hear about, that's a great way to earn money, but they're like, I don't really know how to dive into it. What did that look like when you were first making that transition?
Yeah, man. So real estate it's like real estate has a special place in my heart, and it always will, because it was, number one, the first thing that introduced me to the possibility of being able to live a lifestyle that's different, right? In terms of not having to trade in time for money. It's like that concept was only like solidified to me through real estate. I couldn't see it in any other light. I couldn't even see it in business. I couldn't see it through stocks. I couldn't see it through, it was like real estate, right? Wow. So initially, like the biggest thing, and now it's like there's a formula to it, right? There's a formula that I always tell people, it's like very straightforward, man. Your 9 to 5 income must be used to, number one, leverage. I don't even want to say 9 to 5 income should be used to invest into education that's going to get you now a new source of income, whether that's a business or real estate, which now that investment will produce cash flow, or that business will produce cash flow, which can then be reinvested to buy more assets that will produce cash flow, right? So it's a very straightforward formula starting from a 9-to-5 job. So for me, that's exactly how it was. It's like the biggest thing was the education in the beginning. It's like before I bought my first property, spent 6 months just reading books, listening to hundreds of podcasts to just learn about it. Right. And the best way that I always recommend people to get in is just through house hacking. House hacking is the ultimate strategy. And so for those that aren't familiar with house hacking, it's essentially where you buy a multi-unit property and you live in one unit and rent out the other. So that essentially covers your cost of living, right? So now you can essentially live for free or very cheap. And that was the way I was able to get started. I bought a single family house that had a garage apartment, and it was essentially I could rent out the main house for the 3-bed 2-bath for 13 or initially it was like, well, now it's like $1,400 a month, and the mortgage on there is $1,200. Okay. So I live in a garage apartment. They pay $1,400. I get to live for free. So I make $200 a month while I live in my own house. Wow. Right? So you can see it's very powerful because number one, you are now eliminating your cost of living. So now your expenses are completely gone. And on top of this, it's a very, very, very cost-effective way to get into real estate because there's so many. This is the thing about living in America. It's so like people don't realize how privileged you are to live here because I was in Spain a few months back and I was telling people how easy it is to buy property in the US, and they're like, oh my God, like FHA, that's only something that they do here. They don't do that in other countries where the government is going to insure a loan and allow a lender to give you 96.5% of the value of a property for you to buy a property, meaning you only have to come in with 3.5% down to buy a multi-unit property. Right. A cheat code, super straight cheat code. So that is the way I recommend everybody to start because that you only got to live in that property 1 year. You can move out. And now you've been saving all that money for so long. You now have a nest egg to catapult you to your next property after living in that property. And then on top of that, there's so many creative ways to get into real estate through hard money and private money. I mean, we've done so many deals not having to bring a dime into the deal. Bought so many rental properties, bought so many flips in the last 2 years without having to bring a dime in because there's so many creative financing strategies out there. So I don't want people to think money should be something to limit you from trying to get into real estate. Start with house hacking. If that is something that is possible for you in your situation. One thing, and I'm gonna say this briefly, I always talk about is the concept of comfortability versus profitability in the sense that, when I graduated college, I was making good money. And the first thing I did was, I deserve this. Let me go get the high rise, the high rise apartment in the best part of the city. And so that's what I did. Right. And, paying $1,200 a month for a 1-bed, that's a lot here in South Texas, in my specific city. So it's like, I'm paying that much money and it's not like I'm struggling to pay it, but like, that's money I'm burning every single month. So on the spectrum of comfortability versus profitability, you can choose to be very comfortable or you can choose to be very profitable. Typically, the more comfortable you are, the less profitable you'll be. But typically, the more profitable you are, the less comfortable it's generally going to be, right? So even when we talk about house hacking or having a multi-unit property, the most comfortable way of house hacking is probably to, have the duplex or the triplex or something like that, right? And you live in one unit, meaning you get your own private unit and rent out the others. But it can get more uncomfortable, right? Like what Marlon did. Marlon had a single family house. He rented out the bedrooms initially. That's not as comfortable, but it's going to be much more profitable, right? You can even get less comfortable than that, right? He could have said, let me actually even rent out my own bedroom. I'm going to put a little cot in the living room and put a curtain divider up, and I'm going to just have a living room. So it's levels to it, it's a spectrum to it. And you can, and this is why, like, when you figure this out when you're young, you really have so many capabilities because you don't have a wife, kids, husband, all these things that can possibly limit you from actually being able to be as profitable as you want to be while you are young, especially 21, 22. I mean, what else you got to lose, man? So
that's facts. So coming over to you, Marlon, one of the things that I really like to touch on this podcast is letting people know that for me, I think the true key to success is relationships. And the one thing that I can say is the partnership and the relationship and the friendship that the two of you have is unique. Can you speak to how valuable it is having Alex, not only as your friend, but even your partner in business?
Man, so that is a great question for one, because that really brings it back to understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each person.
Right.
Because I always say that between me and him, he's the visionary. I'm like the integrator. Because and that's just that's really how we've always been too. Like he's always going to be the person that has ideas. He didn't even mention this, but back when we were in college, he had an idea that said, you know what? We should start an engineering firm one day when we get out of college. When I tell you that thought went like this over my head, I was like, just not even entertaining it. So he always had that entrepreneurial mentality of just like having a vision for like what's possible. My thing was that once I have the right information, I can integrate. That's one of the things I've always been really good with, is being consistent at whatever it is that we need to get done. And like I can do it consistently longer than most other people will ever care to do. And so that's been where we meshed really well. That's why I believe that we've been able to stay consistent with the podcast too. Because we continue to bring on guests. We continue to have episodes. Like Alex has mentioned before, that he's like, I don't know if we would have hit 100 as fast. We probably would have hit it eventually, but that's something that I've been able to bring to the table in that aspect. So we both are able to complement each other in that area. That way we can continue to push it forward within this partnership. I would say that's probably one of the biggest benefits. So now we can continue to grow it. But having that foundation, we're able to identify what roles that will be best for each person based on our strengths.
Nah, that's amazing, man. And what about for you, Alex? When you look at the partnership and the friendship that you have with Marlon, like how valuable is it to you?
Man, it's crazy because like I always say is, the way everything we have is very organic. Like nothing is forced at all, because it's like before we was doing all this, we had known each other since 2009. So it's like we was 12 years old. I met this dude in 7th grade English class, kicking him in the back, kicking the back of his chair. And it's just like no, you got to open up a whole nother story. It's like, yo, we was rocking out since like the beginning. And it's just, everything was just because we had such a common motivation, which was just to be the best at everything we did, like he was saying earlier. And when you have that with someone, it's kind of like that can take you so far. It will take you very far, farther than you can even think. Because I could tell you, whenever we was growing up and stuff, it wasn't where I was like, I told, like Marlon mentioned, I told him, I was like, yo, we could do the engineering firm thing. I kind of knew when I told him something like that, it's like, I knew his mindset wasn't necessarily like in the whole entrepreneurial thing. So it was kind of, I was just really floating it out there just to kind of see like how it would.
Trying to toss a lob up, but I ain't jump for that lob.
yeah. So at that point, it was kind of like, okay. And I kind of thought, I was like, man, I guess that's just not really for him, like the entrepreneurship thing. So, it's kind of like, all right, I'm going to really just rock out, do it on my own. And, when it kind of got to a point where I, again, tossed him the rich dad, poor dad lob.
Right.
He took that one. I was like, nice. And I remember I told him this. I was like, yo, once I gave him that book and you read it, I knew it was a wrap after that. We was going to get there because I know we was going to be doing it with each other. And it was like, that's powerful, man. Because I just know whenever we're working together, it's like a certain, I don't know what it is. It's just like a 1-2 kind of punch thing. That's super powerful. And I just, honestly, it's just a blessing, and I can't even give advice on that, because it's like if you have someone in your life like that, then try to utilize that person. One thing I try not to say is don't just get in partnerships, and Marlon says this too, is don't get in partnerships with people that are just there because they're just there. Right. But be in partnerships with people that actually provide value to one another. And we weren't necessarily thinking like that initially, but it was just we just knew each other's mindset. Right. And it was just like, we will figure it out, because we just know we both had a mindset to like, once we figure out what to do, it's just a matter of time. Right. So that is just, it's powerful, man. And it's probably the one thing that's like, man, it's a blessing.
Right.
Me and him were talking, me and Jay were talking beforehand about just the anomaly that this is, because I was even telling them, I don't even think that's something that could be taught. I can't teach somebody else how to start a co-hosted podcast, because of the fact that it's so organic, and there's like more of an anomaly understanding that you're not necessarily starting a podcast based on proximity. Proximity being people that are around you or just like somebody you already know, and let's start a podcast together. It's way more than that. It just so happened to work like that for us because of the mentality that we both had to succeed in whatever we were doing. And so as long as we were both on this, when we were both on the same page and operating together, that's when there's the sky. The sky isn't even the limit. We go beyond the sky at that point. So that's why I think that this really works for us, because when we're both operating, there's nothing that can stand in our way with that.
Yeah. And definitely an anomaly when you look at it from the content creator podcaster perspective, but even more so when you talk about business, right? Because whenever you throw money in the middle, you know, it has the tendency to bring about implosion for a lot of people. And that's the one thing that I really wanted to kind of tap in and see how valuable to one another you are, because it is truly a unique situation to see two men being able to not only come together, collaborate, maintain a friendship, maintain a business, and be good at the same time. Most people, they check some of those boxes, maybe one of those boxes, but you guys have, you know, like you said, Alex, it's been a blessing that you've been able to literally check all of the boxes. And I hope that you guys continue to grow. I hope that you guys grow even stronger together as friends and as business partners, man, moving forward.
And one thing I do want to say real quick too, I want to shout out Marlon too, just because like one thing is like I'm a very unique kind of person to have to work with, and I'm very
that laugh is telling.
That's hilarious to say.
No, because I mean he knows what I'm talking about. Because like at the end of the day, I'm a type where it's like I'm a very type A kind of person. It's like things need to get done, and they need to get done like. I like things being done a certain way. And it's I didn't really start to come to know myself until like the last year or so, 2 years, to like learn the type of person I actually am. But it's just how I've always been my life, in the sense of like, I'm a very type of go after time kind of person. I don't want to stop. Like nothing's going to stop us. Right. And it's a very, it can be hard for some people to like work with people like that. But Marlon, he's again, it's kind of like strengths and weaknesses, because he's opposite in me in that way, where it's like he's able to he's a little more flexible with things, right? So that's where it kind of like finding that person where you all mesh like that is like that's the key. Where it's like you're filling in those gaps for each other. That's the key thing about all of this. That's the reason it works, because I can say. So other people, if they was like working with me, it's like, yo, they just probably would have been like, all right, man, you on your own, bro.
they chucking you to do.
Yeah, just being real.
Nah, that's real. That's real. Now, coming back over to you, Marlon. We talked about a lot of the good things, right? But we know that every business comes with its challenges. And I'm curious, running a rental car business in addition to the real estate, what challenges have you had to overcome along that journey?
I mean, you want to go deeper than that, man. Listen, we give whole sermons about not doing multiple things at a time, because that creates the challenges. Most people are concerned about facing challenges within one business. If you do multiple businesses, that's where every business is going to have its own set of challenges. So now you start adding more and more things onto your plate. Now what's going to really start scaling for you? It's really going to be nothing, because every time you start moving the needle on one area, something else starts slowing down, or something else has an issue. Now you got to go handle it. Right. And then we start handling that issue. The thing that was building ahead of steam slows down. So I strongly recommend against for people to start with multiple businesses at a time. I do not recommend that, because of the fact that it's so much of a challenge. I would say now for myself, we actually started downsizing the number of businesses that we had, because it was very difficult to manage. So for instance, we had bought a mobile home last year, back in like August of last year. At the same time, we had bought our first rental car. And so it was two different businesses. It's our real estate business that was in Houston, and then me and my dad's business within the rental cars. Because we were trying to focus on mobile homes and rental cars, I was only able to buy one rental car in all of 2020. It wasn't until 2021 where I realized that because we're splitting our time and attention between too many different businesses, nothing was really was able to grow. So December 2020, I said, okay, we're slowing down we're not doing any more mobile homes. Okay. We're not acquiring no more rental properties. And all I'm about to focus on now is the rental cars.
Okay.
So that's when me and my dad scaled from one car to acquiring 12 more in 2021. Wow. because of the fact that we said, well, I'm focusing in on rental cars. We acquired no more mobile homes. We actually sold the mobile home that we had bought. And the only reason we have the other rental property is because it's already been there. There's already been cash flowing. We've been able to figure out systems in place to keep it going. So that's there. We have that one rental property there. And then Alex, and we have another partnership out in San Antonio where we were doing real estate. Now they handle most of the real estate on that particular side of things. I wasn't really even focused in on that. I would say our partner, we worked really well in that aspect because we were able to break out our roles pretty good to where I didn't have to be as involved physically. But that's why I'm saying if I did have to be involved physically, we might have shut it down like immediately because it would have been too time consuming. You only get 24 hours in a day. I hope if you are going to spend, if you have 10 hours that you devote to a business and you have 5 different businesses, that means each one can get 2. And I hope you plan on eating, and I hope you plan on having a personal life, and I hope you plan on sleeping. If you don't, then you can have more time to put toward those businesses. But that's why I say you should focus in on one, because each one comes with their own set of problems and their own set of things that need to be accomplished to actually scale, automate, and delegate different tasks to people.
Oh man, yo, that is powerful right there. And what it really reminds me of, and I'm not sure if either of you have read the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, but it really reminds me of that, getting laser focused, picking one thing to just go all in on.
You know, I'm so happy you brought that book up because I got that book. Actually, what year was that? I think it was 2020, Christmas of 2020. It was when 2019.
It had to be 2019.
Yeah, it was 2019. And I got it at someone gave it to me at work, coincidentally. And I started reading it, and he started saying, it's like, man, you got to focus. You got to do one thing. You got to do it. And I was just like, man, throw this. I ain't trying to read this. I'm trying to have multiple streams of income.
Like, what this dude talking about?
Yeah. Like they say you need multiple streams of income. He telling me to only have one stream. Like, bro, I'm not. So I literally stopped reading the book because I didn't really like what he was saying. And I had to experience it myself. Like I had to go figure out that multiple streams of income is just multiple streams of work early on. Like that's the reality of it. You don't get multiple streams of income the way you think it's going to be until you've got them all automated and running without you. Right. So that is the multiple streams of income. But that it doesn't happen like that. Right. Jeff Bezos didn't get Amazon's multiple streams of income by trying to build them all at one time. You focused on one thing, scaled it, and used the resources from that to now divest into other things that can now, bring a return for you. And so that is the thing where most people go wrong, especially in this day and age of like we live in information overload. So it's like you get so many different things in businesses. Everything looks great, right? Everything looks exciting. You want to hop into everything, but that's the wrong move. And I always tell people, it's like, yo, especially if you're young, it's cool. Try different things, experiment with different things. But once you figure out that one that you're like, all right, this is the one I'm really feeling it, stop the other ones and focus on that one for as long as you can. At least 5 years. At least 5 years. And see the results. So
now, one of the things that often comes up when it comes to businesses, you hear people talking about the importance of passion and, this being something that you enjoy doing. And I want to get your take on this, Marlon. Do you find more enjoyment doing what you do now versus being an engineer? And if so, how much does that actually factor into the business that you started?
So, I didn't realize that you were going to ask the question in regards to my engineering job, because that was a whole different conversation now. So I wasn't ever really passionate about engineering, just to be perfectly honest. Okay. I never truly knew from high school. Like people always ask, what do you want to be when you grew up? I felt at the time that it was better to have an answer than no answer and say, I don't know. So now I started thinking about, what am I good at? I'm good at math. I'm good at science. I like working with my hands. I've been in a woodshop class before and I like doing that. But what I lacked was experience of the actual real world and knowing what people did in different fields. I don't know what a doctor really does when I dive into it. I don't know what an engineer really does because I never had that experience. I haven't had any internships. I haven't done any of that stuff. So I don't really have the experience to know that this is something to solidifying what I want to do. I never knew what that was. So I, by default, based on math, science, and working with hands, I said engineering. And to keep it simple, let's say mechanical. Okay. So like I said earlier, it doesn't really matter what you throw at me. If you give me the assignment I can execute on it at a high level.
Okay.
And so engineering was just that. Like because I'm catering to my strengths of math and science, and then that's like with the workload that's coming along with it. It's not hard for me to be successful in it, but it doesn't mean that's where my passion lies. Just because I have skills in that area. So even with the rental cars, I wouldn't even say that there's a passion there. Like I just love cars, but what I am passionate about is family, time, like the free time to be able to spend with my family. Because now a backstory with that, when I was in college and high school, my parents would come to every single one of my games in football. And that's one thing that I cherish a lot more as I got through college. I realized that a lot of the other players, when we would like go after the game, go up to the stands, a lot of other players were just going to the locker room. And that's because of the fact that they didn't have any, like their parents, they didn't have them to go to when they were at the end of the game. But I always had mine there. I would say that they only missed probably one game out of those 8 to 9 years that I played football.
Wow.
So that made me really
shout out to your parents, man.
And they're still working. They're sacrificing. My dad is saying, yeah, I got to work. I'm working in the morning. I'm working at 5 a.m. the next day. And I'm here at your game up until midnight. I'm getting back home at midnight from driving to Nacogdoches, Texas, and back to Houston. That's 2.5 hour drive. So they're sacrificing. And then even another layer that really makes me cherish family is seeing my grandmother. My grandmother, she really, really, really wanted to be able to live her retirement life with her husband. That was one of her biggest goals in life. I think it was back in 2003. She was like in her 50s. He was 62. He ended up passing away when she hadn't even retired yet. So he ends up passing away. She gets to retirement age. Now she's spending that retirement age. I think it's almost been 20 years since he's been passed away. And she hasn't had anybody to spend that retirement life with. So because of that, I'm like, you need to have a way to be able to enjoy the time with your loved ones earlier. That's my biggest driving factor now. That's the passion part. So we've had a podcast guest where shout out Andre Hatchett. He's mentions that passion can come on the back end of your business. Like you may not be passionate about what you're doing, but it's going to be the thing that enables you to have the passion lifestyle that you desire. And that's kind of where my passion is. That's what continues to drive me, is knowing what is my why behind everything that I do.
Oh man, yo, that's powerful, man. And shout out to your family. It sounds like they've played an instrumental role in not just you being an astute businessman, but also being the man that you are. And, you know, that goes a long way in life. It definitely does. And that brings up this question for you, Alex. When you look at your life, your family, your community, are there other people aside from Marlon who play a pivotal role in helping you to be able to do the things that you do on a daily?
Yeah. Man, I'm a big seeker of let me say this first. So my whole life, because I wasn't born in this country. Okay. So I was born in Kenya, and we immigrated here when I was 1 year old. Okay. And for me, my parents' biggest goal for my life was just to get an education. Like literally, I had never seen them more proud than the point when I graduated college. It's like, wow, African household. That's just the typical, that's the typical thing. And so it was like, when I graduated college and I did that, I kind of reached their dream for me. Right. But that wasn't necessarily my dream for my life. Right. So, and now it's like, you know, we look back on it now and it's like, cool. But I am so grateful for just the position that I just happen to be in, because like I said earlier, living in the United States is, you don't know how valuable that is until you can't. Right. It's like people are dying to get over here. And the opportunities that you have here are just unmatched. So for me to, you know, be able to be born somewhere in a whole nother country, third world area of the world, and get an opportunity to come here for like, I didn't do anything to deserve that. I just happened to be born into that family. Right. And so to me, I am so grateful, and I attribute everything I'm doing today. I can never say I'll be self-made. I could be the richest man in the world, whatever, multi-millions, billions. I'm never going to be self-made, because so many things had to happen for me to even be in this position. Right. And so now, I mean, now it's like, I don't necessarily like look to my parents for any business advice or things like that or anything, but I contribute a lot of everything that's happened due to the sacrifices and things that, like Marlon was saying too, that they made. That's my biggest motivation now for like moving forward, for, you know, doing things obviously for them and also for my future kids, and because that one thing alone changed the legacy and the next 50 you know, people without my last name. So it's big, man.
Oh man, yeah. Seriously, like you just shifted a generation and established a legacy.
Yeah.
As one person. And that's the thing that people often don't think about, right? It's one thing to chase the bag, right? It's one thing to have the businesses and the accomplishments or even the titles or the letters before or after our names, right? But that legacy piece is huge. Like when we leave this world, as we know we all will at some point, what are we leaving behind? How are the next people that come along? How are, like you said, Alex, how are the people that's going to bear our last name, especially as men? How are they going to fare in this world because of what we did while we were here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Vitally important, man. Vitally important. And I want to come back over to you, Marlon. And earlier, Alex was talking about a formula that he utilized when making that shift from 9 to 5 to now being an entrepreneur. And I'm curious, we know that there are a lot of aspiring business owners out there. They listening to this podcast now, and they're probably still in that 9 to 5. What do you think is a way for them to make that transition in a way that makes the most sense?
Well, I just want to reiterate the formula that Alex was talking about. It's starting with that 9 to 5. And the first step that he mentioned was the education piece. I can't stress that enough, because a lot of people are going to look at people that are providing the education as scammers. So I will say now, understand there are people that are out there that are like that, but at the same time, you would willingly spend tens of thousands of dollars on a college education to get to be in debt for almost a lifetime for a lot of people, and still don't get the returns that you can get from spending a couple thousand or hundreds of thousands, whatever it may be, on somebody who's actually doing the thing that they're teaching. They have done it before, and they have receipts showing the evidence that they've been able to achieve a level of success. And now they're actually a real teacher that can show you their mistakes and get you a result much faster than you could get by going to a 4-year university, where the first 2 years you're taking all the redundant classes that you don't really need. So, because understand that college is a business in itself. They're putting you through these classes in order to keep you there a little bit longer. That way they can get more money out of that. These courses that you're looking at and that you're down talking like, oh yeah, you're a scammer, you just want my money for a course. That can give you a tangible result. So even if it's not even it don't have to be a course, it could be free information that you research, but get the information. The education is the real key to the next step. Because now once you have the information, now it's all about application. So now you continue to leverage that 9 to 5. Leverage 9 to 5 as long as you can to start paving your way towards being able to achieve the lifestyle that you desire. So the first step that we did was the house hacking. That was pivotal, because and there's a science behind it. If you look at our entire setup right now, even both behind me and Alex, this is we're living in house hacks at this moment where we're saying this.
Wow.
This is my entire studio apartment. You can see everything. This is the bathroom. That's the front door.
Wow.
That's everything in here. You can see all of it at one time. But we're doing that for a purpose, because financial freedom is defined as being able to cover your living expenses and not having to work to cover those. That's essentially what it is. So if we can build a business that can cover our base living expenses, then, and if our base living expenses are $2, then if I make $3, I'm financially free. That's simple math. So our housing is covered by the tenants that we rent out to. Our cars, we don't even have car notes. We've been driving the same car since high school. And we're 25. We got those cars back at age 17, 18. And we're still driving those same beat up cars. People clown me about my car. When I started up, they say it just makes this big loud sound. It drives itself, like it be stuttering. Like, but that's with a purpose though, because I'm keeping my expenses low while I build my business up. And so understand that mentality of delayed gratification that allows us to get to our goals much, much faster, because now we're taking all the money that we would be spending on the luxury lifestyle early and reinvesting that into the business. And when you do that, that allows the business to grow. It allows it to start cash flowing. And now that cash flow can provide the lifestyle that you actually desire at a much earlier pace than what you would have if you were trying to enjoy the money right now.
Oh man. So many gems you just dropped right there. So many gems, Marlon. And yo, I appreciate you so much for sharing that, because that's what people have to understand. Education is so important. And to a certain extent, making those sacrifices, right? As you had mentioned earlier, Alex, we do want to live in that lap of luxury, right? You get the apartment, you get the fly whip, but at what cost, right? Because the one thing that I remember from B school is the fact that there's always going to be an opportunity cost. And if you do not take the time to weigh whether what you're giving up is worth what you're receiving, man, like, you could really be setting yourself back. And I think that's what a lot of people do. Is a lot of people could have been millionaires many times over, if they would just take the time to say, hey, should I invest this in this purchase, or should I invest this somewhere else that can actually, as you mentioned all throughout this entire discussion, create a cash flow? So yeah, man, that's pivotal. Now, I want to come back over to you, Alex, as we begin to wrap things up in a little bit. You mentioned earlier that you identify as like a type A personality. So I'm curious to know, like, what daily habits do you kind of hone in on a daily to allow you to keep functioning and maintain your success?
Yeah, I love that question because to me, a lot of it is just, it became my lifestyle. So a lot of the things that people would consider as like a habit that they got to force themselves into is just lifestyle for me. Right. So something as simple as, and this is super extreme, but I just want to illustrate the point. Right.
Right.
But when I go to the grocery store, I buy the same exact things every other week. I can almost predict exactly, the exact dollar amount that my bill is going to be every single time.
Right.
Every time I go out to eat on the same days, I go to the same place every week. Now, I'm not saying this, you got to be anal or something like that. I'm saying this to say it's like your routine. It's like, what do you do regularly? What are the things you're doing regularly? That's where the most change is going to come from, right? It's the 80-20 Pareto principle. Right. 80% of your results will come from 20% of the activities that you do. Right. Or you could even look at a reverse in that sense. Right. So for me, I know that the things I'm doing daily, the common things I'm doing daily are going to produce the small common things I'm doing daily are going to produce the most results. Right. So something as simple as me, waking up every day and going to the gym, right, in the morning. It's not something that's going to advance my business necessarily, but it's something that's important to definitely set the tone for the rest of my day. Right. And I do that I do that 4 days a week. And for me, after I leave the gym, I come home, I'm taking a shower, I'm eating breakfast at the same exact time every single day. And I'm starting work on the business from the same exact time frame every day. And I think the biggest thing people could do is actually have some sort of a schedule. Right. Especially, I mean, if you're working a 9 to 5, because I know a lot of people probably working a 9 to 5 and you're trying to build a business at the same time. What you got to understand is that it's much harder. It's easier. Oh man, how should I say this? So when you're working a 9 to 5, you got to really understand that, like, you can be very comfortable doing that, and then you can come home and waste a lot of time. Right. So it's like 9 to 5, you working. But 5 to 9, you really got to be working. Like that's where the real work comes in, right? Like this is like 9 to 5 is going to pay the bills, 5 to 9 is going to build the empire, right? For me, it was more so like 8 to 8 was going to pay the bill, and then I was working from 10 to 2 in the morning after, because I still had to go to the gym while I was working a 9 to 5, and it's just that's the reality of it. And for a lot of people, soon as you let your emotions and the way you feel dictate the way you act, right? So instead of actually being disciplined, you're letting your emotions, in the sense of I'll do this when I feel like it. You're only working on your business when you have a boost of motivation to work on your business. But when you need to be disciplined doing the same exact thing every single day, even when you don't want to do it, that's where you're actually, especially while you're working a job, bro, you got to stay on top of that after you get off of work. That's the biggest thing. And then once you become a full-time entrepreneur, I mean, it's a little bit tougher, because now it's you gotta structure your entire day now. So, and if you don't structure it, then you can really waste a lot of time.
Right.
You can waste a lot of time. And that's my biggest takeaway for people, really.
Oh man, both of y'all dropped some major gems right there. And that one that you just hit on, Alex, is the key, because most people don't realize that the structure and the discipline they have is built into the fact that they have to be at their employer from time 1 to time 2. Like, you got to be there from start to finish. But if you have no discipline and control or structure over your time once you leave that place, you are setting yourself up when you do decide to transition into an entrepreneur and you haven't fixed that problem first, man. And I've experienced it myself.
Bro, and that's so crazy, because like people will work and be so dedicated for those 8 to 12 hours for this other corporation, but as soon as it comes time for your own thing, it's like, I don't really feel like you ain't gonna tell your boss, I don't really feel like doing it.
Right.
But soon as you get home and it's time to, work on do some education for the business that you're trying to get into, or, just do something to move your business forward. It's like, I'd rather kind of watch Netflix right now.
That's what happens, man. Yo, that's real talk. That's real talk. Yo, man, this has been such an amazing discussion. I appreciate you both, Alex and Marlon. Before we wrap up, there's a fun little segment of the show that I like to do with my guests called Pick 3. The way it works is I have a list of 16 questions. I'm going to ask you guys to pick a random number between 1 and 16. We'll do that 3 times and kind of see what your answers to each of the questions will be. So let's start with you, Marlon. What's your first number between 1 and 16?
2.
So here's your question. What was your first big treat yourself purchase to celebrate the success of your business?
That's the wrong question.
Change the question. Man. I don't, bro, that is like the wrong question for me. Alex starts saying it. I really got to think. I'm like, shoot, what can I qualify as such? And
tell them what it really is.
I don't know. Bro. You tell me. You might know better than I do, to be honest.
I mean, you know how you treat yourself with things that's like people don't even say is treating themselves. That's all I'm saying. So it's like,
I treat myself with like a trip to McDonald's.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, man,
what's on that order, man? At least give us that. What you getting?
2 hot and spicy, and the lettuce only, large fry, large iced tea, no ice.
Oh man, look at that! I love that. Yo, we can tell you're a creature of habit too, man. Just like Alex was talking about, you know exactly what you're ordering.
No, he was spitting straight facts with that. Like, when you can lessen the amount of decisions that you have to make on a day-to-day basis, you can focus your actual energy on what's important. So that was critical. But yeah, I honestly don't have an answer for you, because if it wasn't for my girl and me doing it for her, I don't know what it would be for me, like as far as purchases that I just say the time to splurge, because I haven't achieved where I want to achieve in order to buy what I want to buy.
That's real.
So
here's what I do. Since you're a football guy, I give you an audible. You want to pick another number, or you want to rock it back?
So let's go to number 8.
Number 8. So here's the question 8. If you could own any major company, what would you do to make it better?
I like that.
Dang, these some good questions, man.
So any company in the world, man, you going to be at the helm. What company is it, and how you going to make it better?
I want to say Facebook.
Okay. Meta now, right?
Yeah, Meta now. But that's because I cherish customer service.
Okay.
And one thing that I hate about them is that you cannot get in contact with them as a common person. And so that would be one of my major things that I try to implement there, is to be able to add a customer service chain to it as well. Now, as far as everything else, I need to keep that person. I need to keep them in place to run the rest. But I think that's something that really needs to be added for Meta themselves, is be able to have that customer, because that's going to add the experience to a lot of people, and that's going to make them a true monopoly. Because if you think about Amazon or you think about Apple, I can get some type of resolution for my problem, and that keeps me investing in Apple. I'm like, man, if I call Apple, I got an issue. They gonna solve that problem right away for me. I've had it several times happen. Same thing with Amazon. If you got an order that didn't come through, they gonna hook you up. I don't get that from Facebook though. So that's something I would really try to implement for them, because I know the value of how you make somebody else feel and make them a repeat customer, make them somebody that gives you out referrals, and now you have long-term cash flow coming in for that reason.
Yo, that's real talk right there. And you're right. There's a distinct difference between Apple, Amazon, and Facebook when it comes to customer service, man. Hands down. Hands down. So, that's a really good one, man. So coming over to you, Alex, what's your first number between 1 and 16?
Give me 7.
7. Question is, if you could go back in time, what is one thing that you would change about your business or how you started it?
Oh, man. I would say my journey in general, just in the sense of like, everything I've kind of done. One thing I would have done is I would have house hacked earlier. And I would have, because when I went to college, like I was blessed to be in a situation where it's like I didn't have to pay for college, didn't have any student loans or anything like that through, my parents, paying for my college and also scholarships. But a lot of that money, like I remember like them giving me checks to go pay my entire rent for the 15 months up front.
Wow.
And this happened like 3 separate times while I was in college. It was like $6,000-$7,000 checks. And I was like, dang, just looking back, that money could have been an easy down payment on a multi-unit property in 2014.
Right.
Come on, man.
Right.
You know how much equity I'll be sitting on?
Right.
And now I would have done that 2 times at least just in college. Yeah. I would have rented it out to other college students. Come on, man. I would already have cashed out on those and bought significantly more properties. Right. And again, everything happens for a reason. I'm not mad at it, but it is just like, dang. But so I know now, it's like, yo, my kids, if something they want to go to college or something, it's like, yo, we house hacking that joint. So you're not paying no rent. People gonna be paying you rent. So,
facts. Yo, I love that mentality, man. I love it. Yeah. What's your second number, Marlon?
I'm nervous now with these questions. They come in. 12 is my next one.
All right, 12. So question 12 is, what's a quote or a mantra that you live by or use for motivation?
I got a lot of quotes, man. I'm like one that I would really live by for motivation. One thing I've been living by a lot recently is it has to work or it has to work. That's one that I first heard by Nehemiah Davis, and I'm really trying to embody that one because I am fully determined that everything that we're doing right now is going to pay off. So there's days, the past 3 days, I don't think I left the house because I've been just grinding. And like, there's some days where you be like, man, this is ridiculous. But at the same time, I'm like, I know where we finna end up at. And it's only a matter of time. Like, this is going to work. There is no plan B. We're going to execute on this and it's going to pay off in dividends. And so that keeps me driven. It's like, even on the bad days, just remind yourself of how far you've come. And then understand that where you're going is going to be much greater than this current obstacle. So that keeps me pressing forward.
I like that. So Alex, what's your second number between 1 and 16?
Yeah, let me get 1.
1. Question is, what is a book that has had a great impact on the way you approach life or business? I feel like we already kind of got an idea of that through the conversation to a certain extent. Maybe there's another one though.
Man, I've read so many amazing books just in the last 2-3 years. The one that I'm not even gonna say Rich Dad Poor Dad because we talked about that during the episode, so y'all know how obviously that's like a prereq to me.
Right.
Yeah.
But the one that was really transformational, just in the sense of like operating in business and everything, was the E-Myth by Michael E. Gerber.
Oh man, I haven't read that one. Okay. It's
man,
somebody recommended this book I ain't heard of before. I gotta add that to the list now.
That should be that's one of the first ones you should have been reading.
I would say
I'm slipping.
I would say every business owner needs to read this book before even opening your LLC.
Wow.
Don't even go open the LLC until you read this book.
Okay. The E-Myth is what it's called.
The E-Myth.
Okay, I'm on that. I'm on that.
If you had asked me that same question,
I promise you that.
That was my answer. If you had asked me that question, that would have been my answer. So that's 2 for 2 on that one. Go ahead and get that one.
Oh man, yo, thank you. Yo, I'll be honest, like that's the first time I've ever heard of that book. Yo,
I'm glad I said it. Maybe
I'm glad you said it too. Yo, thank you for picking question one, man. Yo, you just dropped the gem, man. Who knows what impact it's gonna have on my life now?
Exactly.
No, you gonna message us and be like, yo, this book right here.
After you read it, hit us up and let us know.
I definitely will, man. I definitely will. Yeah. So last of the three numbers, what is gonna be, my man Marlon?
I'm gonna go to the opposite end and say 16.
16. Question 16 is, what is a notable opportunity that you missed out on or that you were able to take advantage of? So you get to choose whether it was something you missed or something that you took advantage of.
It's a lot of opportunities that you miss, man, but you can't take advantage of all of them. I would say, oh man, Bitcoin back in 2000, back in like 07.
Yo, that's a real one right there.
To be honest, like, because some things, especially back when most people are fearful of them, that's the philosophy of Warren Buffett. Like, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. Back then, that's when a lot of people are not talking about it. So one thing I did learn from back when we started learning about stocks and learning about like options and crypto and stuff like that, is to watch how the market is, watch how people in the market are acting. If everybody is raving about something, that's when I'm like, okay, that's the greedy right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and step back. And now when everybody's really, really quiet and nobody's really making any noise, I like to relate to the emojis. So if you're seeing a whole bunch of rocket emojis in group chats, I'm like, all right, it's time to go. If I'm seeing a whole bunch of crying emojis and people are like, man, I'm hurting. Or if you just see crickets, I'm like, yes, sir, this is the time, right?
Right.
It's the time to be in. So that's what I would say about Bitcoin. Because I remember, like, I forgot what year it was. I want to say 2017 or something. I forgot what year. But that's when everybody was raving about Bitcoin. But then, like, a little bit after, everybody just dropped off for a minute. I said, okay, that would have been the time to buy right there. That's an example. But
that's a good one, man. That's a good one. And you remind me of a previous guest that was on the podcast, my man Dennis. Shout out to him. He probably felt the way you felt, Alex, about the house hacking, because somebody had tipped him to Bitcoin, him and his father, and they would laugh at it. They were like, yo, this dude is a joke. And looking back, they were like, oh my gosh. And he learned from that lesson. If anybody come to him with some crazy foolishness, do your research. It don't matter how crazy or insane it sounds. He's like, after that, I go and I look into it myself before I just write it off or just laugh the person out of my life and say that they crazy. That's real. That's real.
Yes, sir.
So what's going to be your last number?
I'll take 10.
10. Question 10 is, what was the first business idea that you had, and did you launch it or not?
Man, I like that. The first business idea, like just from like ever in my life?
Ever in your life.
Man, there was so many when I was a kid. Always just, my mind was always like, yeah, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. The first one that I could really remember. Oh man. I want to say it was in, what grade was that? I don't know. It was like in like maybe 5th grade or something. But so I guess it was like what at that time, 10 years old. So one thing that I had always thought about was like, because this was like, what year was this? This was 2006. So, the world was obviously a very different world.
Right.
But one thing I always thought about was like, being able to, the internet was like, it wasn't where it was. The internet was like, it wasn't new, but it was also like, you wouldn't like on the internet like that.
Right. Right.
So I thought about that whole concept of like being able to like live like a digital life on the internet, because one thing I was always like doing was like playing like online role-playing games. And so the thing people call metaverse now is like, I had thought about that concept, but it wasn't necessarily something that I was like, it was just like a thought. And it's like, would be something cool to do. Right. Because I played a lot of those games online and stuff. There was one game called Second Life, and I played that game. Like, I don't know, most people have not heard of it, but I played that game all the time. Yeah. And it was, I don't know, it was before people were thinking like, that you could actually have like a digital online life, which obviously now it's like we're kind of moving into a phase where your online life is becoming more important than your physical life, right? And once and it's kind of like stages, right? Because once TVs got introduced, that took us down like maybe from now we used to be 100% in the real world to like 85% now in the real world. Now, and then once the internet came, brought us to like 60% in the real world. And then once phones came, it brought us to like 50%. And you know what's next is going to be smart glasses, to where now you don't even have to pull your phone out of your pocket. You just got your phone right on your face. That's going to take us probably like 10% out of the real world. And that's where everything's moving. So to me, I don't know. That was just something I thought of, but it obviously I didn't act on it, because if I did, I would already be good money and I wouldn't be here right now.
Nah, man, that's dope. That's dope, man. Wow, I've enjoyed this conversation so much, man. Both of you have been dropping so many gems. I really appreciate it, learning about your journeys, especially from both sides of the coin. And before we go, I just want to hand the mic over to the two of you. Are there any questions that you like to ask me, or any last or closing words you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I just want to ask you too, just how do you think podcasting has actually like changed your life or impacted your life just over the life? You're an OG, like you've been doing this 3 times long as we have, more than 3 times as long as we have. So shout out to you. But I want to know, how has it impacted you? Because that's one question we get asked, and I love hearing that.
It's impacted my life huge, because it's been a part of my life for those 10 years. And kind of how you made that estimation of how the percentages of our life going from living in reality to living in a digital world. That's kind of how my life with podcasting has been. You know, it went from being something that I just kind of did on the side here and there to being something that I did almost full time at some point. You know, there was a time when I left my corporate job where all I had was the podcast. That's really all I had. Then I stumbled into some side gigs, into some freelance and stuff. So it was like 90, 80%. And slowly it's starting to like diminish a little bit more, but it's had a huge impact. I don't think that I would be sitting here talking to you guys if I hadn't stumbled across it 10 years ago. I started on YouTube, believe it or not. Like I started on YouTube, and I was essentially podcasting on YouTube before I knew what that was. And somebody was like, just randomly in the comments, like, yo, you should start a podcast. I'm like, what the heck is that? And the rest is history. So it's had a huge impact on my life, man. I'm grateful for it. The people that I've met, the opportunities and the doors that it's opened, man, it's been extremely instrumental.
I love that. And that's what we always say too. It's like, if we didn't start podcasting, definitely wouldn't be here right now. Yeah. Definitely wouldn't be here right now. So did you know that the word podcasting it only came out in like 2006. Mm-hmm. So it's a relatively, the word itself was like a new thing that Apple created based off of like, Apple was the actually creator of the word.
I didn't know that. Now that's something I didn't know. I did not know that. Wow.
So it's new. That just tells you how early you are, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, man. The way technology just kind of stumbles out of nowhere in some cases. But with podcasting, it was something that had kind of it existed in the fringe or in the shadows. Yeah. And then, you know, once celebrities kind of took into it, that it was a ball game after that. Because I think what really gave it momentum is when people saw the profitability of it. And that's the one thing that I look back, you know, you look back at, you know, man, I wish I would have, you know, house hacked sooner. The one thing that I wish I would have had the idea or the mindset to monetize podcasting. Man, I literally was in the game for almost 8 years before I was like, oh, I can make money from this. And it's like, dog, how big of a waste of time to a certain extent was it to just be focused on content and not seeing that, yo, there was the ability to profit from this. Profit from even sharing people how to start a podcast. That's how a lot of people was able to make 6 figures and plus, just tell them what they do. And it's like, man, I've been in this game way longer. Like, why ain't I think to do that? So yeah, man, it's real.
I love it.
That's a fact, man. I did want to just give you like just a fun question for you. What was one of the worst experiences that you've had working with people with the podcast, like guests, for instance, where you had to put in a whole new system in place in order to avoid that happening again?
I'll be honest, man. I've been grateful to not have many bad experiences, and especially with guests. Mm-hmm. And partially that's because I'm very selective in who I allow on the podcast. And even further, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you know, I am somebody that is spiritually inclined. So I prayed that I would only have the right people come on the podcast. So I kind of look at that as a part of me being able to navigate, not having a lot of people that I'm like, dang, I never wish I did that. One thing that I can say is it wasn't so much the person, but just the experience was I had a guest that would talk at 30 minutes a pop straight. And it was one of the most, it would, I don't even really know how to describe it. It was like, what's going on here? I couldn't interject at all. Like they didn't take no pause, like no breaks. Like it was almost like, I don't know the next question, but I'm gonna just answer it like this may be the next question. So like that's the one experience where I was just really sitting there like dang man, I ain't never had this happen before. Like I really don't know what to do, and it made me be real strategic when it came to like questions that I'm asking, because I'm like, I have to ask them a question that they're going to spend the next 30 minutes on. And we're only here for an hour. So I already asked one. I got to make this last one. I got to make it count, man. And that's literally how I felt. I was like, yo, this is going to be a 2-question discussion.
You can do a pick 3 with them.
I could, man. I couldn't. Yo, like that pick 3 would be like 3 hours long. I promise you.
Oh, it's hilarious.
So yeah, that's the one experience that stands out. And thankfully, I don't even remember that person's name anymore. So I can't even, throw no shade. But I wouldn't anyway. But that's the experience that stands out where I was just like, yo, that's unlike anything else I've ever experienced as a podcaster.
I meant to have an add-on to it. And what did you learn from it as a result?
I learned from that experience that's a good question. I would say, man, that's a good question. I'll be honest. Let me be real transparent. I never really sat back and tried to take a lesson from that experience until you just posed that question now. So with that transparency, I'm actually trying to sit here and think, what lesson would I look back in hindsight and say I may have gathered from that experience? And the only thing that I can think about is it helped me to have more manageable expectations for conversations. It made me prepare. Because I've seen the extremes, and in that experience, I hadn't experienced that extreme where it's like, okay, there's a guest that is going to talk and they just going to take over and I'm not going to be able to interject. I've seen the other extreme where they have mastered the skill of brevity, where I give them a question and literally less than 30 seconds, it's a wrap. And that's where, like, it makes me be like, dang, I got to be on my P's and Q's. I literally came in with maybe 7 questions. We finished that in the first 7 minutes. I still got another hour to go. So, like, that put me in a position where I'm like, okay, well, now I got to learn how to have questions off the top of my head. And for me, I've learned this. Never assume that I know it all. I'm always looking for ways to improve. Even from this conversation, there's things that along the way, I've been making mental notes like, oh man, like I need to improve on that. That's something that I take away from every single discussion. But definitely that one for sure is like, man, what do I do if I find myself in a situation like that again? Just learning how to pivot.
No, man, I love the response. And I always like to think of it like that because we've had both of those extremes as well. But I love the question of what do we learn from this situation? Because I was just having this conversation with my dad yesterday. In business, every single thing that we go through, like any type of negative experience, this is an opportunity for a lesson to be learned. Right. And so what can I take away from this moment? That way I can implement something in the future that when this does happen again, because it probably will, the longer we do this, it's probably going to repeat itself. So what can I do now? And what can I learn from it now and implement for the future? So it's like in that case with the people that are really long-winded, you got to be a little bit more aggressive with like stepping in and saying, hey, I want to pivot the conversation forward to this. Or even another example is being very strategic with how you answer a question, being very specific. Right. That's just some certain things that we've learned from that experience. So yeah, and I appreciate you for sharing that though.
And another thing that I've learned that I actually implemented, I don't think it was a result of that. I think I had this practice before it, but it made me see the importance of doing it, which is having test calls. Now, since I've been doing it and, I know a lot of more people are familiar with it, I make it optional. It was optional for you guys to do the test call or just come on here, right? But before I used to require it. Like it was a requirement to have a test call prior to the recording because that was a filling out process, not only for us to get to know each other, build a little bit of rapport before the conversation, but I could also kind of get a precursor as to what to expect in the full discussion. Because even during that conversation, you can tell, oh, this person is really talkative or this person is really closed off. And it helped me to prepare prior to going into the full discussion. Like, okay, I may need to add maybe 3 or 4 more questions, or I may need to be real targeted and select maybe 3 just in case I'm only able to ask certain questions. So that's another lesson that I've taken away as well.
Yes, sir.
Love
Oh,
it.
man. Yo, you guys, any closing words before we go to the audience?
Man, it really is just figure out what you want, and at the end of the day, figure out like if the people that you're listening to are going to actually help you get there, because there's a lot of information out here and people telling you different things. So just figure out if what you want is lined up with the people you're listening to. Even if you listen to this right now, you listen to us. Obviously, our whole thing is early retirement, financial freedom. That's what we talk about on our show and our podcast and everywhere. So, if that's something that resonates with you, then, listen to us. But if it doesn't, don't listen to us.
Yo, that's real. Value in that time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought of a whole quote just kind of based off of that, but really this is like my takeaway from everything.
Okay.
It says the greatest strategy to be alive. No, the greatest strategy in the world is to be alive and not know why. And so my sermon with that is it's okay to not know what your purpose is, but at the same time, it's not okay to not be seeking it out actively. And so that's my biggest message for anybody, is to go figure out what that purpose is for you. And that's going to be what fuels you on a day-to-day basis. Without that, you're going to find that most people are just letting their days go by. There's a whole book called Outwitting the Devil by Dale Carnegie. And he talked about how most people are what's called drifters. And they're just drifting through life, letting days go by, and they're just going down a path to nowhere, essentially, because they lack the purpose aspect. And so that's why I think you should actually be seeking out, what is my purpose? Why am I here on this earth? What am I meant to do while I'm here during this time? And when you find that, that's going to be what continues to drive you.
Oh, man, that's powerful. Yo, Alex, Marlon, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. Please let our audience know how they can get in contact with you, check out your podcast, and show you guys some love and support.
Yeah, man, just follow us on Instagram at Money Monopolizers, and definitely check out the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, Money Monopolizers podcast.
That's it.
Fantastic. Yo, you guys have an open invitation if you ever want to come back on. It's truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for everything that you share with us today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, man.